presentation is proudly brought to you by the National Center for Wellness.
Hi, and welcome to the Childbirth Summit. I'm Dr. Rob Coombs, and on behalf of the National Center for Wellness, I am excited to bring you an interview today with the Lamaze International President, Elise Weiss. She has just become president of Lamaze and is a childbirth and postpartum educator. She is a certified doula, a doula trainer, and a lactation counselor and a doctorate candidate in public health. She has a liberal arts degree with a focus on reproductive health education, and since 1989 has attended hundreds of births and taught couples about pregnancy and birth. She's the author of more than 10 books, including the About.com Guide to Having a Baby and About.com Guide to Baby Care. And she's also a freelance writer and lecturer across the country on pregnancy and healthcare topics. She is the past recipient of a number of awards, including the Elizabeth Bing Award, the Normal Birth Award, and the President's Award from Lamaze International, as well as the Coalition for Maternity Services Forum Award. So she and her husband together enjoy 8 children. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to the interview tonight. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Love to have you. This is fantastic. So I know in looking through your bio, you are a very busy woman. You have accomplished a lot so far, and I'm sure it's just on the beginning side of things. But one of the things we're going to be talking about is the new campaign from Lamaze, and I absolutely want to have you or give you the opportunity to introduce the conversation a little bit. So can you begin the conversation today talking about the goal of the Lamaze Push for Your Baby campaign?
Well, the Push for Your Baby campaign is really centered around teaching women to ask questions and push for better care for their babies. So many times women get the message that they need prenatal care, but they don't know what good prenatal care looks like. And in absence of that information, women just assume more technology or more appointments equals better care. And it can be really easy to become lost in a fray in a big practice or a practice that has its routine down when it's particularly your first baby and you don't know what to expect.
Right.
You just sort of are shuffling along. And so our goal with the Push for Your Baby campaign is to really help moms and their families understand how they can be a part of the prenatal care process and ask the right questions to make sure that they're getting the appropriate personalized care for them and their baby so that they can have the safest, healthiest birth possible.
That's fantastic. How long has the campaign been going on? I saw the video. Looks beautiful.
It has actually been running for slightly more than a year now, but it's something that we have continued to add components to, educational components to help people understand various aspects of care. So, for example, we've added several infographics this year on some of the challenges that women can face in childbirth.
Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges? And we're going to talk a little bit about routine practice. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so for example, one of the things that Lamaze has is the 6 healthy birth practices. These are 6 evidence-based care practices that are hopefully easy enough for families to remember to try to focus their care on. And an example is the first one is let labor begin on its own. For the vast majority of women, an induction of labor is not needed and in fact can impose a risk on mom and baby that is not healthy for them. It's one thing to say mom or baby has a medical condition that necessitate an induction, and when you're weighing the risks and benefits, at that point induction becomes ideal for families who are having complications. But if you find out that your provider is saying, hey, why don't we induce labor? You're 39 weeks, why not? Well, why not? My baby's not ready to come.
Right.
Just because I hit my due date doesn't necessarily mean my baby is ready. So looking at various things like the discussion of induction and simply letting that labor begin when baby and labor are ready.
I think that's incredibly valuable. I think the whole idea of a due date is almost egotistical to think that the baby at conception went from two cells into this entire beautiful baby that has fingernails and eyelashes and all the right organs, and yet somehow doesn't know what date to be born on. It just means that our guess was either early or late. But I love that it's moving that way. For so many years, that was the standard norm almost, and so to be getting to a place where we're allowing the baby literally to dictate in the mother's body to dictate when birth happens, that's a really profound step in the right direction. It's great.
Well, I think the interesting point is that women have always known this, and midwives knew this.
Right.
And I think it's taken a little bit longer as organized medicine has tried to figure this out, that it's not nice to try and fool Mother Nature. Now, obviously, everyone needs a good safeguard, and some babies need to come sooner. But the vast majority of moms and babies are better off waiting for labor to begin on its own. It makes labor easier for both mom and baby and reduces the risk that the baby may wind up in the neonatal intensive care for a variety of reasons that related only to that induction.
Very true. And like you said, the vast majority. I think some of the most amazing work that medicine has ever produced is the ability to save a baby, and especially the time frames that they're able to intercede and to do things when complications arise. I think that's remarkable and should be lauded. But like you said, the vast majority, 99, 90, high 90% of the time, it's great to let it run its course. And then if there are other things that come along the way, then you step in. You mentioned that there were six steps. What are some of the other ones?
So some of the other ones are freedom from routine interventions. And notice I said routine there, not freedom of interventions. Just don't do it because we do it to everyone. Do it because I need it or my baby needs it. Being allowed to bring someone with you to labor and birth so that you're not alone, including your partner, friends, loved ones, a doula. Freedom of movement in labor, being mobile, getting up and assuming upright positions while you labor and birth, and not separating mom and baby, giving them plenty of skin-to-skin time once baby is born to allow for that bonding and breastfeeding process to unfold at its own schedule.
Those all sound just intuitively logical. The fact that we need research to prove those things is a sad reality. I think you need research to prove they shouldn't be done.
Right.
I'm glad to know that a lot of those are pretty much what's being done at this point. I think that's fantastic. Any information or any resource about delaying to cut the cord or the importance of nursing right away?
Well, we do have a lot of information both at our website, pushforyourbaby.com and lamaze.org, but we also have two excellent blogs that we run, Giving Birth with Confidence, and for the childbirth educator or birth professional, there's Science and Sensibility. So we have professionals who stay on top of the latest and greatest science just as it's emerging, to help inform both our childbirth educators and our parents as things are moving right along. We understand that science has to catch up with Mother Nature, and we also know that the time from the lab bench to the bedside for an obstetrician can be great. And hopefully as Lamaze childbirth educators, we can help bridge that gap and reduce that time by helping providers hone in on some of the key things to help keep moms and babies safe. And largely that can come from consumers, from a mom saying, hey, what's this I hear about delayed cord clamping? And let me share this with you, what I found. And many times we hear that, there are providers like, oh, great, she pulled something off the internet, but has been really pleased to see that, we have highly researched,
Right.
respected people in their fields talking about the research that they've done themselves, or people who are highly capable of synthesizing the research, helping to explain it um, to the lay public in a manner that helps them make this information usable in their own personal lives.
I think it's wonderful that you have it as a resource and a more credible, you know, location in the internet than a Wikipedia type site. You have the actual documented research, and it gives people the ability to hand a paper to a doctor, and that is a lot more meaningful when the doctor sees a reference to a site like that. But it just makes logical sense that you would want to have those stem cells that are in the cord back into the baby for what the potential of what they can do for the baby in the future. Again, just makes sense. So that's fantastic.
Well, and it's also important as you look at the Lamaze certified childbirth educators. Many of our educators have been teaching women and their families for years. And so this is new information.
Sure.
And it's important that we get this to them so that they can stay on top of it as well. So that no matter which Lamaze childbirth educator you choose, you know that you're getting the highest degree of information in terms of it being up to date.
That's fantastic. What else should moms be asking their care providers?
Well, I think some of the things that are important to ask, first of all, knowing that you are a partner in this process,
Good.
that you have hired your care provider to provide you a service, and that you need to know what that service looks like. You need to know when will you be on call, who will be on call, what does your call schedule look like? When do you induce? What would that look like? Why might I need to be induced? And things like, have you ever seen a birth, and then insert some description of the type of birth that you're looking forward to? There's a huge difference between a practitioner who is willing to try your type of birth and merely be present versus one who is supportive and willing to go that extra mile to help you make that happen. And that's something that, particularly again, first time moms may not be aware of, or they may not be aware of how much time their practitioner will actually be at the bedside versus, how much wonderful support a labor and delivery nurse may be in addition to the team that they provide themselves, being their partner, their friends, their doula. Those are all, that's a team, and you have to make sure they work together. And that starts at the prenatal visits and asking questions. Ideally, people would even start asking questions before they're pregnant to try and make sure that the provider that they have is somebody that they have a common philosophy with. And that common philosophy can really help drive home the theme or tone of the birth, as opposed to, a practitioner laying it out on the line, well, at month 1, this is what we do, and at month 2, this is what we do. It should be a communicative process. Well, here are the things we offer at month 2. What looks good to you? Okay, I see you've not chosen this option. Here's why I like to do it. Here's why I think specifically you may need it, or here's why I think it's not as important for you. What's your take on it? What kind of questions you have? So being able to have that kind of conversation with your practitioner can be very valuable. But just knowing what they find is routine and what they don't think is routine. One of the things I do best as a childbirth educator, when you come to Lamaze class, my goal is for you to not only know what questions to ask, but to know perhaps what an answer should look like.
Right.
So, for example, if I were to encourage you to talk to your provider about breaking the bag of waters or a episiotomy, if you go in and say to your obstetrician that you've hired, hey, how often do you do episiotomies? And your practitioner says, well, I only do them when necessary. Okay, that sounds like a reasonable answer, unless you know that what your practitioner is thinking is, all first-time moms need an
Right. They're always
episiotomy.
necessary. No.
So you need to, you
Right.
need to make sure that mom knows to say, and what percentage would that be?
Right. Ask the question, get the answer.
Right,
Don't just voice it, get the answer. Oh, that's great.
right.
And you're right. You've had 8. Um, is there anything that you wish you had known as a result of your 8 experiences going into your first?
I think probably the biggest thing that I wish I would have known was I had an amazing practitioner who was on board with everything I wanted. I never felt like I had to go in and kind of strong arm or fight, and I really felt very well supported. But when I showed up for labor and he wasn't there, and it was a female, I remember thinking to myself, oh, not my doctor, but that's okay. It's a woman. She'll get it. And not realizing that, no, they were as far apart as could be. You would think people would be in practice with similarly minded people, and apparently that was not the case.
So they
And so,
each had a different philosophical approach to what it is they were going to do and how they were going to do it.
right, and I
Oh my
wound up with
lord!
the one who's like the complete opposite. And here, my serene birth has now turned into basically a screaming match.
Wow.
And it was very tense, very terse, and definitely not how I wanted to bring my baby into this world. Um, I really just wish I would have known to ask. And I remember bewilderedly asking my obstetrician, when it was his turn back on call and I was in the postpartum, like, oh, what was that? And he said, oh, that was my partner. And I was like, yeah,
Putting
the
in for
two
a
of
new
you
one.
don't seem
Right.
to eye.
That's scary because a lot of women go to offices where there are a lot of different doctors on call, and they, I think the women try to, and the offices try to make sure that you have an opportunity to meet each of the different doctors or midwives in a practice, but you, you're working under an assumption, and you have to rely on what they tell you, and if you don't ask all the right questions, you might not have all the answers that you need. But that's got to be daunting. As a man, I'll say that's got to be daunting for the woman to go into that situation and not really know. As the dad and the father in that role, I'm advocating all I can for everything she's ever wanted. But you know, uh, it, as a woman, I just imagine that's got to be a very frustrating thing because you don't know, and you're at the mercy of a system that may or may not support what you're looking for. And if you had a doctor you absolutely love, and yet that's not the person you get, that could be frustrating. I could see how that was tough for you.
Well, and just to find that out ahead of time, even if I had had some clue,
Right.
if I had had the ability to think forward and say, and I made changes in subsequent pregnancies to say, let's talk about your partners.
Yeah.
What are the chances you won't be there, and when is that, and what would that look like, and can I meet your partners, and, okay, you have 7 other people in practice with you. Which one of these people is most like you?
Right. Or at least, right.
Right.
Yeah. Good
And,
information to know.
even simply saying, look, you and I have got a special thing going, and, is there any way that you will consider, letting me call you if you're not on call? But I think one of the nice things about childbirth class is the camaraderie of other couples in the class.
Sure.
So you have a nice mixture of usually first time parents and people who have been around the block before. Not to mention, as a childbirth educator, I know because I'm either attending births perhaps as a doula or hearing birth stories as a Lamaze childbirth educator from other people. I've got a pretty good idea of what's going on with whom,
Right.
and that might not always be the case with every practitioner. But I'm going to have a pretty good idea,
Certainly.
and I can say, well, have you asked your practitioner about this? So it's something, or let me connect you with someone from my last class who gave birth with them, and they can help you talk to you about their experience and what it was like for them. Typically, when we pick a practitioner out of a phone book or out of out of our insurance company's book, it's a guessing process.
Right.
Maybe we pick a name and we ask our next door neighbor, hey, what do you think of Dr. So and so, or the midwife down the street? And our neighbor gives us her opinion. I loved it. It was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. Well, that was great. But what you really don't know is,
What did you
how
want?
did your neighbor feel
Right.
about birth? So, there are a lot of different things going on there, but I always tell people who contact me via the web that aren't local to me, so, would not be in my childbirth class, when they say, Robin, how do I figure out what to do or who to talk to? Go to your Lamaze educator in town. Ask them, hey, do you have somebody who's been here, somebody who can tell me what the real deal is with my practitioner?
No,
And that can be very helpful, talking to other moms who've been there with that provider in the moment.
fantastic, absolutely. And even to understand the facilities themselves. Sometimes women have multiple hospitals or birth centers to choose from, and the opportunity to figure out where you want to go and what questions to ask, even on the tour, or be connected to other moms that have been there. That can absolutely make a huge impact, a huge difference. What else? What else would you say is important for parents to learn as they're going through a childbirth class with Lamaze?
Well, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that you should always keep all of your avenues open. It can be very easy to enter into pregnancy or enter into your childbirth class thinking, I know exactly what I want, and I don't need to listen to anything about the epidural. That's not for me.
Right.
Well, you don't know. During labor, it may wind up being a great option. Or moms who say, I don't need a childbirth class. I'm getting an epidural. Lamaze isn't for me. And that's also not true, because there are things that Lamaze can do for you that have nothing to do with the epidural. The epidural is really only a very small part of labor. There's that entire lead up to the point at which you could get an epidural. There's everything that happens after. There's even positioning and things that we can teach you in a Lamaze class that will help you decrease some of the risk that may be associated with getting an epidural in labor. But knowing that it's not your only option, that you have a lot of options. The best thing that I get to do as a Lamaze educator is to show women their complete range of options, from epidural all the way down to different positions to try in labor, different massage techniques, bringing their partner or husband in and saying, here's what you can do and here's how you can be helpful to make labor less frightening, less painful, and that also includes the surprises. I was coming back from the public health conference this past week, and I was sitting next to a man on the airplane who we started talking, and we quickly turned to babies, and we quickly turned to Lamaze, and he said, my wife was all set to have an epidural, and we get there, and her platelets are low, and they tell her, nope, sorry, can't do that. And we just floundered. We had no idea what to do because we didn't have any options. And I think probably the thing that I would like to tell people is that it's not just epidural or nothing. There is a lot in between. And that's where the Lamaze class comes in to help you fill in those gaps.
Now, when you say an epidural or nothing, so you're saying either 100% natural or an epidural, or you're saying an epidural into the next stage of ultimately a full intervention like a C-section?
Well, I think it's more people think the only thing that you have for pain is an epidural. They don't understand that water can help combat pain, be it a shower or a tub, or that using an called a birth ball can help alleviate pain, that movement helps
Movement,
alleviate
absolutely.
pain. Relaxation, and many of these can be used in combination with one another. And many of them can be used in combination with an epidural, so that even if the epidural does provide complete pain relief, there's still anxiety that goes along with giving birth, and that can cause mental and emotional tension and pain. And some of the techniques that we talk about in childbirth class can be very beneficial there at helping mothers and their families and partners deal with labor as it comes. But obviously, typically speaking, in a labor, the fewer interventions that are medically based that we use, the lower the likelihood of having that unplanned cesarean is.
And absolutely, it's a
Particularly,
slippery slope.
it
Yeah, once you
is.
step on it, it definitely heads in a direction very quickly. Um,
Absolutely.
so I
Particularly,
think one of the nicest things about the education classes and what Lamaze brings is the understanding of what happens, the understanding of all the details to empower families, parents, to know how, you give them tools and strategies on how to navigate through labor. It's absolutely difficult, but it's a normal process in the body. Having an illness or kidney stones, they describe that as being horrendous pain. It's an abnormal pain, completely different than a labor pain, which is a normal pain that your body has solutions for. So to be able to empower those solutions, that's one of the biggest things that, from our perspective with the Childbirth Summit, is to bring the awareness that there are a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of resources. You had mentioned connecting Lamaze parents with members of the classes that have already gone through. Is that a routine thing? Is that a special situation? How does Lamaze handle that in connecting the current classes with people who have already gone through the program?
well, it's not necessarily something that every single childbirth educator through Lamaze does, but it's a tool that many of us use because we understand the power of that family to family and mother to mother support. Many childbirth educators will have someone from their last class come back and tell their story and talk about, you know, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what they got out of class, what they wish they might have learned. Um, excuse me.
Okay.
So, trying to figure out how to connect couples can largely be left up to the individual childbirth educator.
Sure.
Many people have more than one childbirth educator from Lamaze in their area. And if that's something that's really important to you, ask when you're interviewing the Lamaze educators. Do you help connect me to other women in the area? And at the very least, most Lamaze educators are going to be able to say, I don't specifically connect you to people from my classes, but here are local mothers groups where you can find other mothers who have had babies. I know that I encourage the families in my classes to also get connected in a positive way during pregnancy with breastfeeding support groups like La
Absolutely.
Leche League to say, what can we do? What do we need to know about breastfeeding now to make it easier for us as we move down this path towards having our baby? Part of my goal as a Lamaze educator is to get you to think beyond the birth. It's
Good.
not just you get to 10 centimeters, you push the baby out, congratulations, you're done.
Right.
My goal is to set you up for those first couple of months with a great support system so that even if something happens that you weren't expecting, um, even if it's just this is harder than I thought it would be, or what's up with my baby's diaper,
Right.
or what's a good solution for this, that you have that support system in place. We may not live near our families, we may not have grown up watching other women give birth, but one of the things that we can do is we can certainly learn from the village that we are around. And my goal as a Lamaze educator is to help keep you connected to that village and grounded so that you don't feel alone in sometimes what can feel like a very large sinkhole of new parenting.
Right. And you feel like you're the only one. I can remember my wife saying, as she was driving my daughter around crying at 2 in the morning, she drove by one of her girlfriend's houses and the lights were on. And it was very reassuring to her to know that she wasn't the only one up at that hour. But it is, I think, one of the most important and greatest assets that you can offer is the resource of connectivity, of being able to tie together people who are in similar situations, either going through it with you or having already been through it, so that you can ask questions or simply hear what happened to them, because it does. It absolutely, it broadens your level of understanding and your ability to respond to any given situation more appropriately. So I think it's a wonderful thing that you offer, and I would absolutely encourage you to make those connections stronger and stronger, because that was something that for my wife and I, hearing the couples that went before us, I think it was one of the most impactful lessons that we learned, and it was something that we absolutely gave back and went back to talk about our experience a number of times. So I think it's
People
great.
start, it's funny, once we've had couples come back in class, and I'll usually have people come back more than one class because in the evaluations that I get at the end, those listening to stories from other families are often rated very highly.
Sure.
And so I just have one person come at the end. Uh, but it has become the joke more than one time, like, pick me, do I get to be the one that comes back? I want to come back. And I try and let everybody know they're always welcome back no matter what, to come and share their story. And so sometimes we'll have more than one couple come in and talk about it, and that works out really well.
That's
One of the
fantastic.
other
And
things, well, one of the other things I wanted to say that we do teach in class that I think is very important is many people do not understand that, particularly when you're giving birth in a hospital, that part of the hospital policy can create some of the pain that we experience in childbirth. And that's not something that they say on a tour. They show you the big lovely bed that can move in 17 different directions that you're never going to hope to master while you're in there. But what they don't tell you is that simply getting in that bed and sitting in it, which is frequently what women feel compelled to do because the first thing usually is, well, hop up on the bed and let's check you and do a monitoring strip and see where you're at. And then rarely is the invitation made to get up and move around after that point. And being stuck in a bed, no matter how big, no matter how many positions it gets in, is an example of something that can cause unnecessary pain in labor. And so knowing where those hot spots or triggers are can be a very important part of what I teach you in class. And while the hospital tours are absolutely valuable, particularly in terms of, where do you go when, what's their triage policy, what's their fetal monitoring policy, and these are things that I hope to get to prime you for before you get there so that you can ask these questions.
where do you go? Where do you go in the middle of the night when you get there and the hospital front door is closed? Right.
Right. What do you do when the ER people's eyes get really
Right.
wide and freak out like,
Been
like
there.
they've never seen a pregnant woman before? Right. I always tell people the ER does not want you giving birth down there. They will get you hot to trot up to labor and delivery very quickly. But just letting people know, like, there are things that you can do, and you do have a voice.
That's fantastic advice. It's really important. And lastly, are there any misconceptions that you would want to touch on with Lamaze?
I think probably the largest misconception about Lamaze is that we're a specific technique, or that we're about Lamaze breathing. While breathing can certainly be something that you use in labor, be it a deep relaxing breath, a cleansing breath, or even pattern paced breathing for some educators, it is only one tool in a wide variety of tools that childbirth educators from Lamaze teach you to help make your birth more comfortable. We've talked about a lot of them here, but we've got the evidence behind us to show you that there are ways to make your birth more comfortable, safer, healthier for you and your baby, and to help you advocate for that care for you and your baby. So to push for your baby. And that's why we named the campaign that.
I think that's great. And it's one of the things that I always, as a dad, try and help other dads connect with, is one of the most empowering things that they can do, is to be more present, to be at the classes, is to put in the time, to understand. Growing up, no one is talking to the guys about childbirth. No one talks about, what a birth is like or holding the baby. It's just that's something that, in my experience, was done, and the guys I talked to. So if there's someone to go through that childbirth experience with, whether it's a partner, whether it's a husband, whoever it is, that person can be a huge advocate for you and help you get into the routines and the things that you've been taught, that you've been educated to help with childbirth. And certainly if you have a doula, how they can all tie together to bring all the information to make that childbirth experience as wonderful as possible. I think it's great.
Absolutely.
If you could, as a last thought, if you could tell expecting mothers just one thing about having a healthy pregnancy, what would it be?
Learn what your options are. To quote A Good Birth, a Safe Birth from Diana Court and Roberta Scare, if you don't know your options, you don't have any.
Well said. I like that. That was quick and easy. Well done. Well, the quick link to your free resource, the 6 Healthy Birth Practices, is listed at the bottom and is included in the email. So listeners can absolutely connect with Lamaze International, learn a lot of the resources, become members, and have access to some amazing tools that'll help make all the difference in their pregnancies. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate the wonderful conversation, good information, and I look for your 11th book at sometime in the near future.
Right after my dissertation.
Well, good luck with both. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's fun. On behalf of the Childbirth Summit, I'm Dr. Rob Coombs. Get well soon.